Sorry, Lorraine. Welcome to everyone to this meeting, council, officers, public and press, and anyone who may be viewing online. Can I please remind councillors to turn their microphone on while speaking and to turn them off again once finished, otherwise you will not be heard on the broadcast. Can I ask if there's any apologies for absences this evening? Oh, sorry, yes, please sit down. I'm sorry. I can't move this chair, can you? It's like an August chair. Right, we'll say that bit again. Is there any apologies for absence this evening? No? Declarations of interest. Councillors need to declare an interest on items on the agenda, and can I remind councillors that you should declare the agenda item a reference, the type of interest you have, and the reason why you have an interest. Nope. Moving on. I have an announcement to make this evening. I'm going to stand up while I read this out, if you don't mind. Members, officers, I've got two announcements to make this evening. Very sad ones, I'm afraid. It's with great sadness that I inform the council of the passing of former councillor Val Hargreaves. Val was a long-standing and committed activist within the local Labour movement and served as a councillor for Horside Ward from 1979 to 1983. And on behalf of the council, I extend our heartfelt condolences to Val's family and friends at this difficult time. Secondly, I must inform you of the tragic news that former councillor and Mayor Sue Wright and her husband Stan were recently involved in a very serious road accident. Sadly, Stan has passed away and Sue remains in hospital. We send Sue our very best wishes for a speedy recovery, and our thoughts are with her and her family during this deeply difficult time. I would ask members to join me in a moment of reflection for those affected by these losses. Thank you. Item 3, changes to meeting procedures. There are proposals on the agenda for changes to meeting procedures, as this is an extraordinary council meeting. Extraordinary meeting. Members are asked to agree that following the introduction of the leader's report, the Chief Executive and other council officers deliver a presentation on local government reorganisation, with no time limit on the presentation, and that they remain seated on the dais for this. After the presentation, members will have the opportunity to raise questions. The usual procedural rules for Cabinet members' reports will continue to apply as set out in the agenda. The leader will respond in turn, and each question is raised. Members are also asked to agree that a response may be given by the Chief Executive or other officers on a technical or procedural matter in relation to the presentation. Can I ask if councillors are you all in agreement? Yeah. Agreed. Local government reorganisation, pages 3 to 14. So Councillor Williams to present her executive report.
Yes, I present this report. I just want to say a few words. I'm sure everyone here agrees that the best option for Blackpool would be for Blackpool Council to continue delivering services for our residents. But no change is not an option. Tonight we have an opportunity to share views in the spirit of what is best for our town. I'm hopeful the points made by all parties will help us represent this case throughout the decision-making process. Putting forward a proposal gives us a voice with ministers as they consider the 5 options on the table for Lancashire. Our proposal is the only one which has engaged with how people's lives work instead of looking at an artificial boundary on a map. An authority between the Wye and the Ribble makes sense in terms of transport infrastructure, housing, efficiencies and opportunities for our wholly owned companies. The result is a proposal which is not only best for Blackpool, but also best for Lancashire's rural community and market towns. Our request to split 2 existing local authority areas creates more meaningful places which relate to people's real lives. It creates a balanced Lancashire which each of the predominantly rural, manufacturing, coastal and market town areas having an equal voice on the Lancashire Combined Authority. This will result in more local, meaningful, strategic direction which works for us. These boundaries will shape services and lives for the next 30 years or more. Putting people first is much more important than looking at a finger in the air estimates of the financial positions of the new organisations. The outcome of the fair funding review will affect this more than any of the modelling undertaken by the consultants. Throughout this process, we will always put the needs of people in Blackpool first as a new council designs services which meets their needs. Our plan will help improve connectivity for our town and across Lancashire, improving access to work and education, create new jobs and build a great future for our town, our people and our children. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. We're just going to go straight into the presentation now. So I'm going to invite the Chief Exec and officers to go through the presentation. Neil Scott Lorraine will then deliver this presentation.
You'd be pleased to know I'm not going to speak at length, unusually. So we've already done briefings for each of the groups over the past few weeks. And in the papers here, you've got a summary over the proposal that is going to go to the executive in a couple of weeks. On Monday, the detailed business case was published, which provides a lot more detail on about exactly what is in the proposal and where the evidence base comes from for it. And all the other councils have put their proposals out into the public domain over the last week or so as well. So Scott will go through them in some detail. But they're all supported by different councils and they go through a 2, a 3, a 4, 2 versions on a 4 and a 5 option for reorganisation. So I won't keep you any further. I'll let Scott go through the detail, but then if there is questions at the end, then we're happy to answer them.
Thank you, Neil. So apologies in advance, I'm just recovering from a cold, explains the voice a little bit. So you will be familiar with this presentation. It is one, by and large, that we delivered to the political groupings. There's a little bit more detail in here, as you would expect, because a bit more time has passed. So our proposal is entitled Our Lancashire, Our Councils, because as the leaders just reflected, I think this says something about how we've tried to engage with the county as a whole and to make meaningful areas for the people within it. So on the front cover there, you've got the pictures that represent a little bit about those new council areas that are being formed, the coastal area, the rural, the market towns, and then the industrial. So just to recap how we got here, this is a result of the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill. That's now at the report stage of the House of Commons. The main things with this is it's creating strategic authorities, such as our Lancashire Combined County Authority, which is a foundational authority. And then there are other models with mayors and established mayors which get progressively more powers under the provisions of the bill. That's required the introduction of unitary councils with the intent of simplifying local government. The new unitary councils would be constituent members of the strategic authorities, and that enables a strategic joined-up view for what's right for Lancashire to be created at that level. And back in March, the Secretary of State invited councils to submit their own views on what the structure of local government should be. So to cover the ground that was required by the Secretary of State, we've had to include things about the opportunities and challenges. In our case, in Lancashire, there's 5 options, as Neil said, and how they would fit with the principles the government has outlined. An analysis of financial and socio-economic factors, the effects on services, and particularly important, the potential for service transformation and change. And then because it's recognised that these are larger areas, thoughts on new and improved community engagement structures, and including within that what the arrangements for elected member representation is. It also needs to talk about collaborative working arrangements that are needed to deliver that. And in our case, we've included some asks for government, which has included an ask around flexibility over funding of the process itself. So in terms of the government guidance, they've said the council should cover sensible areas, they should be sustainable, they should be able to withstand financial shocks, They should enable stronger community engagement and empowerment. They should deliver high-quality services, particularly in certain areas where there are known pressures, and have a clear geographic identity that makes sense to local people. And it's that final bullet point that I think we've really tried to engage with in our proposal in particular. Of the other options on the table, this is the 2 council options. So you can see there it broadly splits the county into north and south. In this case, Blackpool would be with Fylde, Preston, Wyre, the Ribble Valley and Lancaster in the Northern Authority. All of these have pluses and minuses, some more than others. So there's no doubt this could deliver significant savings if you believe the mantra that bigger is better. It does balance out urban affluent and deprived areas into a kind of, a slightly more homogeneous kind of area. In theory, it gives a simpler transition because you've got essentially 2 councils there. However, it does have a much larger population than Guideline. I think this would create the second biggest local authority by population in the country, which is a very significant kind of step up from the councils that people experience at the moment. 50% of the population wouldn't live near that border. So where you can see there the 2 colours interact, 50% of Lancashire's population is within a very short distance of that boundary. That means that you're going to have essentially a lot of our main urban areas being split across 2 different councils. These are big organisations. One of the critiques of county councils has been that they're perhaps too big and slow to make decisions, and so these organisations would replicate that to a degree. It loses focus on local needs. It isn't a recognisable geography, and there is also the potential for this to muddy the waters a little bit with the combined authority. The combined authority is there for strategic purposes. Would you have 2 organisations that big able to act in a way which is operational and on the ground, focused on communities? I think it's also fair to say that the consultation findings, the engagement findings that we'll come on to, did reveal quite a lot of scepticism about larger councils from respondents to that survey. This is the 3 council option. This has got some advantages from the principles that the government has set out. It does fit well with the population criteria. It is likely to deliver savings. There are 2 recognisable geographies there in the form of East Lancashire and the Preston City region. However, for Blackpool, this creates a geography that would connect us up to Lancaster, and that isn't a geography that I think anybody would recognise in any meaningful sense in Lancashire. There is strong support for the south of the Ribble model, which excludes Preston, which cuts against this model as well. And decision making, again, is more remote from communities in these larger areas. There's less focus on local needs, and again, some of those earlier points about scepticism about larger councils. There would be 3 councils in this model, and that would require a constitutional change for the combined county authority. 2 4-council options, so this is the first one. So in terms of governance fit, it does fit with the LCCA's strategic agenda. It's getting closer to people's preference for a small authority. The proponents of this model would say it reflects travel to work data. However, that's not the same as saying it makes meaningful communities. Is it really the case that we are going to be basing authorities on where people travel to and from rather than where people want to live and work themselves? It's a bit of an uneven distribution model. So if you look at Lancaster, Ribble Valley and Preston, the populations there are all at the fringes of that large authority, which means that the rural voice there is not necessarily going to feel like it's got an obvious centre of government. And then it has this effect of kind of polarising deprivation, where the issues in Blackpool are diluted slightly and raises questions over access to funding, but they're concentrated in East Lancashire. And so we have to reflect on whether or not that would be best for Blackpool. There are fewer potential for savings, and it does heighten some budgetary concerns around the Eastern Council, which, although we are not saying that the financial viability is the principal reason to kind of factor in what we would make as our decision, because actually the differences between these models are relatively small, it does create more pressures for that as a council area. So in view of some of those, this is our proposed option, the administration's proposed option. You can see here we've split 2 of the local authority areas. So we are suggesting that the area west of Wyre is incorporated into the Western Authority, and we're suggesting that the south of the Ribble Valley is incorporated into the Eastern Authority. This seems to be the best fit with local communities and real lives. It creates 4 meaningful councils, each with a primary focus around a coastal kind of area with a significant urban factor, industrial, urban and rural councils. It gives us strategic policy options on things like houses of multiple occupation. If you think about the strip of the Fylde Coast and into Preston, there's some key policy dynamics there that enable us to take a reasonable, rounded approach that isn't displacing problems between areas. It fits with the Combined County Authority's strategic agenda. It fits the Fylde Coast travel to work data. So there are other cases that talk differently about travel to work data, but for us in Blackpool, this is how people live and work in these areas, and there are strong transport links also through to Preston as well as that. So this feels like, from that point of view, the proposed Western Council is the right option. Housing delivery and employment would be strong in this authority, so this is about the opportunities that those areas bring to the table in terms of how the authority grows and prospers in the future. It has to be said, there are the only thing that really is kind of a downside to this model, as the government would see it, is the differences between the population sizes. However, the Northern Authority that is being proposed there at just over 200,000 currently, and with a lot of potential for housing growth, is very similar in fashion to the Cumbrian authorities that have been created most recently as form of unitarisation. And what that gives is something that Lancaster has been on the record as speaking for strongly in the past, which is actually that they feel they are more a part of the Cumbrian area than with Lancashire. This gives them the potential to have the best of both worlds, where they've got a seat on the LCCA, but they're able also to develop new working relationships with similar authorities to the north. The other issue, I guess, with this model is boundary change will require consent of the Secretary of State, and that's why the proposal that we've made asks for those boundary changes at the same time as we are proposing this option. And then there's a 5-council option. So again, this is closer to communities, but starts to really push up against those issues with population size. I think from our perspective, it does give East Lancashire an additional voice at the LCCA, which makes you wonder about the balance of decision making there. It does create agile authorities. You know, we've said Blackpool would rather stay as a single unitary, and that agility is one of the reasons for that. There are some issues around housing delivery, and there are, as I said, financial issues are not the reason to make this decision, but it does create some issues with that council over in the Far East in terms of its viability on an ongoing basis. In this model as well, you've got Lancaster and Wyre together. Fleetwood would, in our view, remain peripheral to decision making across that new combined area. So those are the areas. There has been a resident engagement process which garnered 13,000 responses. People were clear they wanted reliable services, value for money, clear decision making, joint working, and residents being involved in decision making. They expressed concerns about reorganisation. It was only the PR1 postcode sector that actually supported creating unitary councils out of all of the postcodes in the survey. People were talking about loss of voice and identity, unfair resource distribution, and concerns about the costs involved in setting up the new organisations. Similarly, stakeholders came back 237 responses, really more on the practicalities. Like they just wanted better council services in forms of road planning decisions and clearer communication lines. In terms of that engagement, so recognising that FY4 and 5 postcode sectors are not wholly within Blackpool local authority area, you can see here there is a minority in favour of the new larger unitary councils, majorities in some places to retain current councils, and a significant amount of people who are not sure. However, some of the views expressed in that consultation are consistent with the idea of creating unitary government. In terms of the financial position forecast, the outlined box is the position estimated by 2028. This is based on a range of assumptions in the business modelling, some of which are subject to significant potential variation and change. It also factors in things like the ability of these councils to make savings and to raise council tax. So across the piece, we've got these figures forecast for each of these individual local authority areas. I think the key point to take from this one is that the difference between the 4 model and our proposed variation on that is it does address some of the structural issues of the East Lancashire Authority without necessarily compromising too much on the others in terms of what is manageable financially within the budget of these new organisations, which is going to be significantly larger than Blackpool Council's current budget. In terms of what that means for the council area serving Blackpool and the surrounding areas, it does give us an opportunity to preserve Blackpool's identity. It would be one authority administering the tramway. There's good alignment with MP constituencies. There are a lot of social and economic factors by bringing together those areas that actually kind of give us some opportunities there. So a rise in total employment. It would be the only proposed authority to have higher growth businesses in 2023 compared to 2018, etc. And I think some of those other points we've already covered on other slides. It does give opportunities for service transformation as well. So as a starting point, unitary authorities offer financial and process efficiencies, but this needs to be balanced with arrangements that work for communities. What we would say about the transition is on vesting day, and Lorraine will say a little bit about this later, the best approach is to be safe and legal to make sure that everybody who needs a service is getting the service they need, and then to start exploring transformation opportunities which would realise financial benefits and improved services to communities as well. It does give us other opportunities as well for our wholly owned companies and how they'd fit with the new geography, and it can build on existing joint working of which we already do a number of shared service deliveries on Fylde's behalf. It also gives an opportunity to improve engagement. Now, this is something that we would expect members of the new authority to kind of comment on and see what they want to have as the heart of those engagement mechanisms, but lots of potential around digital engagement, building on our successes around co-production and other ways of making sure people do feel more engaged and involved in what will be a bigger council that risks appearing more remote. In terms of elected member arrangements, the proposal is at the moment that there would be around 70 councillors for the western area. It gives a ratio of about 1 to 5,500, which is more than currently. It balances out across the authority with a slightly lower ratio for northern because of the rurality of the locality. This is constrained in part by the local government committee, boundary committee for England, who've capped the number of councillors for the new authority at 99 as a maximum. I'll let Lorraine say a little bit more about elected member arrangements in a second. So just to finish off in terms of timeline, November the 28th is when we will submit our proposal to government. There will be a government-led public consultation on proposals in early 2026, and they will select the option in summer 2026. May 2027 is the elections for the shadow authority based on those new unitary council boundaries, and then April 1st, 2028 is the earliest possible date for vesting day, which is where the existing authorities are abolished and the new councils start to operate. So at that point, I'll hand over to Lorraine to deal with a little bit more on the transitional arrangements between as part of the process.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the transitional arrangements, it's a secondary legislation that starts the process, and it's the structural changes order, and that will be a bespoke piece of legislation for Lancashire and the same with other areas around the country. So basically what that order will do will state that the current councils will no longer exist and the new unitaries will deliver services from vesting day or go live day. The order will also establish when vesting day is, which as Scott's just mentioned, is likely to be the 1st of April 2028. It will also name the new unitary authority in that order. The order we expect to set out that the current term of office for councillors, which of course was due to end in 2027, will be extended by a year, so potentially there will be no local elections in 2027. And if that's the case, they will be replaced by shadow elections for the new unitary authority. So the order will also set out the number of councillors for the new area, the warding arrangements for the new area, and obviously the shadow authority elections will be based on this, and it will also determine who the returning officer is for those elections. The order will require councils to establish joint committees with their partners, obviously when our footprint is known, and there will be a requirement for those authorities within that footprint to work together and start to develop an implementation plan for the new council. So once that order's been made, we will then be required within 14 days of it coming into force to set up a joint committee. So that will be ourselves with our partner authorities and plus the county council. And it will be equal membership for the joint authority. It's not based on size, so the county wouldn't necessarily have a greater say than us. But there will be an express duty to cooperate as set out in that legislation. So those councils must work together, ready for vesting day, and making sure that the new authority will be safe and legal, as Scott has said. There'll be a requirement to set up an implementation team within 21 days, and that team will obviously need to develop work streams to get the new authority in place. So when Cumbria went through this process, they had several work streams across a number of areas, such as finance, IT, customers, people and place. What that committee will also do is start to formulate proposals for some of the governance arrangements, so things like the Code of Conduct, members' allowances, the constitutions, one for the shadow authority and one for the new authority when that comes into effect. And it will also recommend the appointment of interim statutory officers for the shadow authority, because every authority has to have a head of paid service, chief exec, monitoring officer and chief financial officer. So that committee will continue that work until the new shadow authority starts to operate, at which point it will be dissolved. So in terms of shadow elections, as we mentioned earlier, it's anticipated that these will take place in 2027 for the new unitary authorities across Lancashire, and it will be based on the number of councillors and wards set out in the order that I mentioned just earlier. For those councillors that are elected to the new unitary authority, it is anticipated that they will also serve initially a 5-year term, 1 shadow year, and then a 4-yearly term after that. So the 2 authorities will sit alongside for that shadow year. And all elections after that will be on a 4-yearly cycle. So once those elections have taken place, from May of that year, the shadow authority, as I say, will sit alongside Blackpool Council and the other existing councils in Lancashire, and councillors who stand in those shadow elections, and if elected, can sit both on Blackpool Council, also on the shadow authority in that shadow year. And the elections will take place in exactly the same way as they would for local elections. It's a first past the post voting system, and it's electors who are on the electoral register who will have the franchise. So when the shadow authority comes into being after the elections, it doesn't deliver services for residents. So we, as what's termed as a sovereign or predecessor council, will continue to do that up until 2028. The shadow authority will at its first meeting do a few things. It will need to elect a chair of council, which isn't a mayor, but it's the same role that will undertake the civic and ceremonial duties and also chair the council meeting and act as a civic ambassador for the authority. That first meeting will also need to elect a leader who will then appoint an executive, and it has to be a leader and cabinet form of governance, so councils will no longer be able to have a committee system or move in the future to an elected mayor at this level of government. That first meeting will also formally designate the interim statutory officers that I just mentioned. It will agree the implementation plan. It will start to develop the budget, the strategies, policies and procedures, so that come vesting day, the new shadow authority can operate in a safe and legal way. So as I mentioned before, it will also agree things like the constitutions, the code of conduct. And there will be a requirement for it to have certain committees that are set out on the slide. It won't have things like planning and licensing committee because it's not delivering services at that stage, but it will need to have a standards committee, a chief officers committee, and can have and should have a scrutiny committee as well. So then we move to the new unitary authority. So vesting day, as I mentioned, that's basically the go live day. That will be the 1st of April 28. And it's at that point that the old councils will cease to exist and the new unitary authorities will be responsible for delivering services to residents. So at that point, everything will transfer over to the new council, all assets, liabilities, including our wholly owned companies. And staff from the councils will be transferred over to the new authority because it will formally start to operate from that date.
In terms of next steps, there's a shared project team being developed across Lancashire. It's already getting underway with work, so things like data collection can happen regardless of where we know the boundaries to be. It involves prioritising high risk and complex services to make sure, as I said, they were safe and legal on day one, and to agree data access rights between organisations. It's not until we get the final decision as to which authorities are going to be put together that we can do the detailed work on staff, systems, assets, etc. But there is plenty that we can be doing now. This transition will need resourcing. Staff will need to deliver business as usual at the same time as transitioning to new council. And advice from other councils is that this can take several years, obviously dependent on the level of resourcing that we've got. So that's really all we had to say in terms of the presentation.
I think just one thing to add on the transitional costs, they could be significant, but one of the things which has been agreed across Lancashire is that we would submit a request for support for that fund to fund transitional costs. They have been successful in that in Surrey, the only case that's been notified so far. So that will be going through from every single council to ensure that taxpayers don't have to fund the short-term transitional costs of all the work that we're doing. And I think no mention's been made of elected mayors in the Combined Authority, but that is still something which, while the legislation hasn't been laid, could be coming along the road, either in 27 or in 28. And then we would change from being a county Combined Authority towards a normal mayoral Combined Authority, where all constituent authorities would be members of said authority. Okay, and I think with that, we'll just see if there's any questions.
Yep, opening to the floor now after the presentation. Can I take any questions? Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a number of questions for the officers, and it is an unusual council that we find ourselves in. It feels half scrutiny, half council. So if I may, if you allow me, Madam Mayor, to indulge myself, to start, though, with a question for the leader before we start with questions for the officers, to try and put the politics on one side and then the questions for the officers in a slightly different way. In terms of the politics, if I may, for the leader, back in January, Madam Mayor, I brought a motion to this chamber around devolution and where this was heading, and at the time the members opposite rejected it and told us we had nothing to worry about and this was still early days. And when we think of the work that we did previously on local government devolution, the amount of conversations, the amount of meetings, the amount of preparation on something that was far smaller than this feels nothing more than not only rushed, Madam Mayor, but it feels a deliberate attempt by the Labour government to attack local democracy. What this will do, and it has no mandate, nobody actually asked for this, nobody voted for it, and I feel sorry for the Labour members. I know you care much as all of us do about what this will do for Blackpool, is that it will ultimately give us poorer representation at a local level. It will see some of our libraries go. Ankersome Library will almost certainly close in the future council. The tips will go. And that isn't wild speculation. That's exactly what's happened in Cheshire East, where councils were replaced with one larger authority, and then the services were then scaled accordingly. And my worry, Madam Mayor, is that the government are not only doing this to attack representation at a local level, ultimately the people of this country, the people of this county and the people of this town are going to suffer. Blackpool is so unique, as we all know. Trying to merge it with Preston, which is industrial versus our coastal, is a divorce waiting to happen. It just does not make any sense. And it's not something we would choose to do. And the very fact we wouldn't choose to do it tells us everything we need to know about this. My worry and my question, therefore, for the leader before we get to the questions for the officers, Madam Mayor, is why have we allowed this to happen? We're almost allowing ourselves to go out with a whimper rather than a shout and tell the national ministers. I know they've changed in that department, but at no point have I ever felt Blackpool has gone down with a fight in making this stand, and I really feel that the Labour government have let Blackpool down. Initially, people won't realise what's coming, but they certainly will when they realise that their tip, their library, and even Blackpool Transport with its ability to set its bus network here will suffer.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
I'm not sure about rushed. If you talk about, I mean, I think this has been discussed since 1974. certainly over the last Conservative government. This isn't a new discussion. This has been ongoing for years. Since I became a councillor, local government organisation has been discussed time and time again. Yes, because we would prefer to retain our own responsible for our own town and our own people. But the very basis and the reason why we want to do that, it's our difficult argument for us in Blackburn, because the reason why we want to stay as we are, we can see the reasons why the rest of the county, in that double layer of governance, is the very reason why this is going to happen. Because we know that it works. And it is pointless to stick our head in the sand and say, we don't want this, we are not going to engage. And we haven't done that. We have worked with government, we have looked at all different solutions. We looked at getting Blackpool being larger, but it did not meet the criteria. And that's not just the criteria of this government. This has been through years, as I say, of successive governments talking around local government reorganisation. So we haven't allowed it to happen. But what we have to do now is not allow Blackpool to become another Fleetwood. We have to ensure that we get the right unitaries, the right size and the right shape and proposal for our town.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just a little bit confused. Is this just about asking questions, or is this about putting opinions forward? And the reason why I say that, Madam Mayor, is I watched your video the other night, Councillor Williams, and you talked about how you didn't want this to be bestowed upon the group, on the authority. However, just let me remind members in here, because it's an important caveat, the Conservatives, when this was imposed, or should have brought about, it was on an advisory level. The Labour government has made it compulsory. So, yes, you're against it, but your own party mandated for it to go through. So maybe you need to go back and speak to them and put that case forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any more questions? Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I said, I was going to divide this into political for the leader. I disagree with your answer, but I'm now going to go into questions for the officers, if I may. I noticed with the white paper, the English devolution white paper, it refers to obviously the target size being 500,000 in terms of what that will do in terms of economies of scale. Chief, you referenced Surrey. They've just been broken into, or the creation of West Surrey at 663,000, East Surrey 551,000, which starts to give us an indication that we're not going to see a Cumbria type setup, we're going to see something bigger. Where I feel this proposal has a huge Achilles heel, which is why ultimately this feels a bit like a waste of time, if I'm honest, because we're putting a proposal together that will be ultimately rejected by the government, is because the northern area only has 200,000 people in it. Even if those guys were building houses at a rapid rate of knots, there was no way they're going to get anywhere near 500,000. Where is their economies of scale? And I don't feel that's going to make the test that the government are looking to get from this this whole paper. I do have some other questions, but I think it's best if the Chief answers one at a time.
In terms of the $500,000, in the early discussions we had with the relevant minister at the time, which was Jim McMahon when he was still in post, they were clear that the $500,000 was a target, not a floor, so it didn't have to be achieved where it made sense. So that was apparent from discussions with him, which suggested 2 and 5 were considered outliers, too big, too small, and that 3 and 4 would be the ones that would be considered in some more detail. When you're looking at Surrey, the relevant minister, I think Alison McGovern, has said that we shouldn't use that as a template or a precedent. There are different circumstances relating to the issues in Surrey. They have 2 significant challenges within one of their 2 unitaries, which is Spelthorne and Woking, relating to debt which those district councils host. So they have been given a different outcome than they might have got without that. So we don't necessarily see the Surrey model as being an absolute in terms of it being imposed elsewhere. In terms of the boundaries that are in this proposal about whether they are likely to be successful or not, we think the discussion needs to be around community and where people live and the potential for economic growth in all sectors. And we would certainly believe that the three model doesn't necessarily deliver that. So if you look at all of the different proposals and go through the criteria that the government has set, you would struggle to get a full score on any of them. All of them require some level of compromise at some point, and it's a case of picking which are the areas that are the most important and which areas you can accept compromise. The feedback from the public is that we should not compromise on people feeling they belong to a place, and that local government is local. Local government is not national government, and it should feel like that authority represents your interests. And I think the reason for the rural authority as it is the rural community and the rural economy has been very poorly served by Lancashire over the last however many years since 1974. And their voice is not heard, and their voice ought to be heard. And if we want to have a strong economy, then we need a strong rural economy, we need a strong coastal economy, we need a strong urban economy. And in order to hear all of those voices, particularly if we're talking about a mayoral combined authority, to have four uniform voices saying the same things, all focusing on urban issues, not on coastal, not rural, would be an error for Lancashire. And a strong Lancashire is beneficial to make a strong Blackpool, because, to be honest, that's all I care about, that's all I'm paid to do, and this is my town. Oh, have I run out?
Yeah.
Well, that's a surprise. I didn't think I'd have run over, and that's the first time I've been given a red card, so I'll be quiet now.
I'll take Councillor Sloman and then Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. It's some observations first and then a question for you, Chief Executive. I find being here tonight is a very sad day. It's sad that we are even having to have this discussion. Being around in 1995 when we were in the battle with John Selwyn Gummer to get unitary status for this town. We were in the battle to get unitary status for this town. I think that was a wonderful thing, and irrespective of whether it's been under a Conservative government, a Labour government, a Conservative council or a Labour council, I am proud of everything that this town has achieved and the resilience of the people that live and work in this town. I do feel, however, a question for you, Chief, is in terms of the three council option, I do think we're missing a trick here to actually include Lancaster, so that we have a coastal Lancashire would solidify and unify all the northwest tourism with the gateway to the lakes. There are huge swathes of land that are potentially there to be developed in terms of strengthening the housing economy. And since we had COVID and people are working, more and more from home, and people have migrated from urban conurbations, I think there is a huge potential with that three council option to bring everybody together, and I think it would give us a greater voice in things going forward. And that's it. Thank you.
I can give you a view on the facts within the business cases. I can't tell you why that is the proposal that is being put to the executive, because the executive are supported that particular proposal. So there might be more a question for Councillor Williams to ask about why option 4A rather than option 3. In terms of what the evidence shows is our connectivity to Lancaster is poor, both transport-wise and our connection in terms of the kind of economy they are and the kind of economy that operates in the northern element of Lancashire. If we're looking at an authority which is the Fylde Coast plus Lancaster, then you're looking at an authority that stretches from Freckleton to Arnside, and that is one hell of a journey, as well as a substantial journey east to west. So I think it's a very, very big authority, that authority, and that certainly in terms of the resident feedback was big isn't always beautiful. So that's where I suppose it comes down to the evidence supports Lancaster and Fylde Coast being different places. But in terms of why it's the preferred option and why that's been put forward for recommendation to the executive, I'd have to hand it over to Councillor Williams.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but from what's been said, there are a few comments I'd like to make, and there may be a question comes out of it as well. There's been quite a positive slant put on what we've heard tonight. Stronger community engagement and empowerment was mentioned. I don't see that. I see this taking away from our community engagement, putting us further from where the decisions are made, and certainly not empowering us. The potential for growth of our wholly owned companies. Another side to that, we might lose our wholly owned companies. They could just be got rid of. We're told that the transitional costs will be significant, but to avoid that falling on the taxpayer, we will apply for funding, but surely the burden of that also falls with the taxpayer if that's coming from the government. And the leader quite rightly told us that this reorganisation will shape services and lives for the next 30 years or more. And she's quite right, it will. And the biggest thing that I've heard from residents who really aren't aware of this on the whole, most of our residents don't know this is happening. They're in blissful ignorance and don't know of this fundamental, massive, detrimental change that's going to happen here. So why has there been no public vote? That's what I'm hearing all the time. Why haven't we been asked? Why hasn't this government asked us? Do we want this? They haven't.
So Scott, do you want to reply now, Councillor Williams?
I think it's more comments, Councillor Scott. I mean, in terms of there is going to be another good consultation, a round of consultation in the new year. I think around sort of February, March time from the government prior to them making a decision. There has already been consultation that's taken place, and I think although it was overwhelming within the returns of that consultation that people had said that they didn't want the changes, the things that they said that they did want, which was better efficiency, more transparency, more and all of that connectivity and better jobs and all of that, I think is these new proposals for new unitaries with that, if delivered in the right way, will deliver that. So the things that people want, and I think it's up to us to ensure, as I've said before, I'm turning into a bit of a record here, that ensure that we get the right proposal to ensure that all of those things that we want to achieve, that we have achieved for our town, that continue. So that means keeping our wholly owned companies, enabling them to deliver all of those things, because there is likely to be retained, and as much as they are to disappear. It's all about how we approach this and ensure that we get the right proposal to make sure those things are protected and delivered.
Councillor Williams, Councillor Walsh, and then Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to take this time to very briefly outline why I support the model of the 3 councils as opposed to the 4 that's been proposed by the Labour group. In order to do that, Madam Mayor, I've just set out 4 key factors that will bring about social and economic stability for everyone in Lancashire. They are tourism, visitors, business, partners and residents. The tourism economy here in Blackpool is an estimated worth of £1.98 billion per year, providing 23,000 jobs with millions of visitors. Lancaster tourism economy is estimated to be worth £100 million per year with 8 million visitors. Fylde generates an estimated £345 million with 3 million visitors, and Wyre is a strong economic due to the coastal towns such as Fleetwood and Cleveland. So why does this matter? Well, I would say that from an economic point of view, these authorities are largely aligned to the coast, as what Councillor Sloman has already pointed out. Tourism is a key economic driver, and it's vital that we work together for a wider offer within the tourism sector within the North West. Business. As these councils mirror the coast, so investment choices for local businesses can become shared. Supply chains that already exist can continue to grow and expand. Investment can be coordinated on a coastal level. Businesses, and more importantly, funding streams would become more cohesive when working together. This is especially important given the conversations around climate change and the erosion of our coastal coastline. which is something that Councillor Hugo is dealing with. It's imperative that we work together. Again, the proposed 4 unitary model takes us away from this. Partners, Madam Mayor, becoming an elected member, you soon realise that in order to have good governance, you need strong partnerships. So when we look at the services that lend themselves to a 3 unitary model, they already exist. Take, for instance, the police. Currently, we have the West, South and East divisions. Within the West Division, comprising of Blackpool, Fylde, Wyre and Lancaster. Again, natural partners that already exist. Why would we want to change that when services and operations are already being delivered? Incidentally, for those who want to know, Preston falls within the South Division. Finally, Madam Mayor, residents. We come to the most important consideration or aspect of why the model of 3 unitaries is the right way forward, and that's what the residents need. Like many, Madam Mayor, I believe the combination of Blackpool, Fylde and Lancaster would offer a more stable transition that feels familiar with the residents. Indeed, the combination of authorities actually mirrors the geographical landscape that we are familiar with here in Blackpool. So whether it be essential services, tourism, economic growth, etc., I will be supporting, or would like to support, the 3-way unitary model. The motto of this town is progress. That might need to change if this goes through to more
Councillor
regression.
Walsh, sorry, time's up now.
Thank you. Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Councillor Lynn Williams, would you like to reply or?
Yes, just, I mean, it'd be kind of, I think it sets out very clearly in the papers and in the business case and the proposal, but the 3 unitary model does not take into account how people live, how they work and how they travel. They don't. If you look at the travel from Cleveland and Fleetwood, it is down towards Blackpool. From the other way across the Ribble Estuary, it is north. There is not that connection between those 2 areas. That is the case. Sorry. Thank you.
It was Councillor Galley and then Councillor Burdett. Councillor Galley.
A point of order, Madam Mayor. I believe that if this is a normal full council debate, the member has the right to reply to.
I have a right to reply, I believe.
Is it
it's directly in
appertaining
response to that.
Okay.
So I would say, okay, Councillor Williams, tell me, which authorities agree with this model that you've proposed? I know the answer, none. Tell me how many people or authorities agree with the 3 model? 5. So your proposal is not, nobody in Lancashire wants it, other than yourself.
Councillor Williams.
Well, I mean, if you will see there are other, what we're calling the South part, the South Unitary. It is, based on their wishes. Ultimately, the decision will be made by government in terms of the business case, the strength of the case that we put forward. And we believe that we are focused not only on Blackpool, but on the whole of Lancashire. And that is what government will look to. Thank you.
Councillor Williams. Councillor Burdett. Oh, sorry, Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm going to take this, the point that the leader made, Madam Mayor, but I'm going to ask it to the Chief Executive, if I may. So the leader mentioned that our companies have opportunities, and I think you referenced that as well. So if we take bus franchising, that really does expose Blackpool Transport. It would no longer be able to determine full exclusivity potentially on its own network in this town. Whilst we agree, and I like the optimism, I have a proclivity for optimism myself, so I understand that, we mustn't hide from the potential that actually we may not have our own bus network because of franchising. And our companies, Chief, carry a lot of debt. I remember talking to the former chair of the shareholder committee, and we, as Blackpool, had a view that we saw the value more than the price of why we would support our council-owned companies, because we saw the value, the social dividend that they delivered. A new authority may not do that. They may not want a Winter Gardens, they may not want a Blackpool Tourism Limited, they may not want a Sandcastle, they may not want to run a bus service. They may want the trams. We know they make money. but they may not want the buses. But how does that help other residents? So I feel, Chief, that in this, that we need to be more transparent about not just the opportunity, but the reality. And if this was an audit committee, is that a fair reflection of what could happen?
Just to capture a previous question around transitional costs, if you look at the finances of the business case that is going to the executive, it shows by the time you get to 2032, annual savings of £66 million a year from all of the authorities added together compared to the current position, which is cumulatively £148 million worth of savings. That's net of the transitional costs. So the reason that funding is being asked for is to ensure there isn't a short-term impact on services while those savings are incurred in terms of removing duplication between the two-tier system. Moving on to your question, Councillor Galley, the bus franchising is part of the Lancashire Combined County Authority, and under the current rules, which are set in statute, no decision can be made on anything relating to transport that affects Blackpool Transport without our agreement. So we are currently completely protected by that, and any future arrangements in terms of a mayoral combined authority obviously would come with additional resources and would still leave us one of the constituent members in order to ensure that we protect the users of services within this broader area. So yes, that means we're not immune to changes which could be in place for a mayoral combined authority. Similarly, the combined authorities of Merseyside and Manchester, if we look at those, the mayoral funds have brought significant investments into public transport, particularly tramways and particularly rail, when you look at Merseyrail. So that may give us the opportunity to bring funds to make the South File line happen, as well as the connection that's been talked about for quite a bit of number of years relating to Fleetwood to Polton. So it creates those kind of opportunities, as well as potential challenges when it comes to bus franchising. I think looking at the overall asset situation, if you look at our neighbouring authorities, many of them own assets they believe to be critical to delivery of services in their area. Many of our neighbouring authorities still own significant assets around leisure. They own quite a significant number of assets in Preston. They still are in charge of all their sports and leisure facilities, and they obviously have the Guildhall. So they are very much invested in that. And if you go to Lancaster, which could be another potential risk or opportunity, they're significantly invested in their own arts and culture sector as well. So this council cannot stop any future council that is responsible for the Blackpool area from making any decision it chooses to make. But obviously, they will be publicly accountable as we are, and accountable to the electorate as we are. So they should be looking at things that are in the best interests of their economy, their residents, their businesses, etc. So we cannot protect against any future, but those common interests are still there.
Councillor Burdett, I know you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm kind of looking at things from a very kind of personal, human level. And I would just like to respond to Councillor Sloman, where she said, you know, she's looking back at this, she's looking at this as a very sad day from 1995, after the battle for the unitary authority. But she also said that we are proud of what we've achieved. And we as the council, we as the Labour group, are incredibly proud of what we've achieved. And we are fighting hard to defend that, to defend the progress which we know is absolutely essential. We want the chance to achieve far more for our people. And the fact is that staying the same as we are will deny us that growth. It will see us falling far behind every other local authority. And we don't want that to happen. We absolutely want the best for our people. This has not been an ill thought out or a hasty decision. The talks, the discussions, the meetings have been going on for a very long time. And what I can see is that the risks versus the opportunities of devolution bring with it a change that makes everybody uncomfortable. It's a human condition to fear that change, the fear of the unknown. But there is also the potential for the unknown to put us in a far better position and for it to make the lives of our people far better. And that's what we hope to achieve. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bardess. Then I had Councillor Sloman and then Councillor Flanagan.
Thank you, Mayor. It's about connectivity, but first, just in response to what you've said, Councillor Burgess, there is not anybody, I'm sure, in this room that does not have the ambition to improve the lives of the people. We just have different ideas about how we go about it. So I'd like to give you that assurance that I, for one, and I'm sure everybody on this side, that side, and in the middle shares that ambition. Now, Leader, you said about connectivity, and I think it was yourself, Chief Executive. When I last looked, there was a natural corridor a couple of miles down the road called the M6 that would get us from one end of the place to the other. There was an M55 that joined us onto the M6, which was initiated in 1958. There's a coastal path now that's going to be going 67 miles along the coast. So I don't accept connectivity as a problem. Thank you.
Councillor Williams, would you like to reply?
Can I say something about that? Does this coastal path have a bridge which goes over the wire? I would say that. The interconnectivity on the Fylde coast is a strong one, absolutely. You can walk all the way from the top to the bottom, and you could then walk inland to Preston. You could not walk up to Lancaster. And we have to get to Preston before we join the M6. So in terms of our connectivity, we are closely linked to Preston. To get on the train to Lancaster, we have to go to Preston. So we are closer to Preston physically. That's not a political statement. Physically on transport. I can step up my office and I could be in County Hall in 25 minutes. I cannot be in Town Hall in Lancaster in 25 minutes. But that's just geography. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Reply, Councillor.
Absolutely accept that, and I'm not suggesting anybody gets the wellies on and starts trying to walk up the coastal path. And yes, there is a bridge over the River Wye. It's called the Shard Bridge. I go on my electric bike. The other thing is, I get what you're saying. I do absolutely get what you're saying. And nobody's going to walk 67 miles down there. But I did forget to mention that we have got the trains, and I can get to Preston, I can get to Lancaster, wherever I want, as long as the trains aren't on strike and they haven't been cancelled. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sloman. Councillor Flanagan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just two things really. Just looking at the statistics there of the feedback from the residents, when we actually break that down, residents aren't saying they don't want to see change. When we look at them figures, we're seeing roughly a 50-50 split between whether they want change or they don't want change when you break it down. So this isn't a new thing. This is something that we have been considering for a long time under different governments. The proposal of the 4 new councils makes sense to me, grouping areas that are already effectively hanging out together anyway, whether some like it or not. Many who live in Poulton will work in Blackpool. If you're from Preston, you've definitely had a chippy tea on the prom. If you're from Kirkham to Fleetwood, you've definitely sang I do like to be beside the seaside on a hen do or a stag do. We may not always get on, we'll always have differences and challenges, but a constructive and practical partnership has to be the way forward. Here's where it gets interesting. Some of our neighbours aren't happy. The leader of Wye Council said, "We don't want to be lumped in with Blackpool. They've got problems." Fylde's MP called joining us disastrous. What an insult to our town, our businesses, our people and our communities. They're conveniently forgetting, where do residents come for a good night out? Blackpool. Where do we take the kids in the summer? Blackpool. Where do thousands work? Within Blackpool. We bring 18 million visitors a year who spend their money all across the Fylde coast in shops, restaurants, pubs and the B&Bs. It's like your mate who never wants to organise the party but shows up for the free buffet. You don't want to live with us, but you certainly can't live without us. We're not perfect. We've got challenges, but we face them head on. Despite having our budget slashed more than any other council, we've still managed to bring 3,000 civil service jobs to the area, and we keep investing in the town. And I'll run breakfast clubs in every single school so no kid goes hungry. Our plan creates councils that match how we actually live our lives. This plan, if you catch the tram to work, shop in the same town, support the football clubs, will be in the same council. The alternatives, some proposals will just create huge councils stretching from Lytham to Lancaster, which I can't support. I don't want to be ringing for a complaint about my bins and say the department's in Carnforth. Thank you.
Councillor Flanagan. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Flanagan. I just wanted to add to that the comments from Mr Snowden and also from the leader of Wire that have been very critical of Blackpool. What they neglect to mention, and is somewhat contradictory, is that they are wanting to increasingly use our services to deliver their services, which, given that it would be a disaster to lump with Blackpool, well, they already are, because they want our services, they want to employ us to deliver some of their services and more so. So, go figure.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'll wrap these two final questions, if I may, to the Chief. So this next one is around spending restrictions as we get closer to 2028. What sort of spending restrictions will we see on this authority with some of our capital projects, say, for example, the Central Drive Scheme? Oh, and if I was going to wrap that up, wasn't I, to save some time, because I was conscious of that. And then I wanted to know if, I know this goes to executive and that report has already been published and so forth, but when we make the submission, will we include some of the comments that have been raised by members that have raised genuine concerns? Will that be acknowledged in the report that goes to government as well, or will it just be the comments that are in favour of the proposal?
Thank you, Councillor Callan.
Can I speak every week? It's fun, this. Yeah. I'll try and keep it brief. Lorraine's probably best positioned to answer a couple of those questions in regard to some of the decision-making. But once the legislation is laid in 2026, that will dictate what spending restrictions are put in place. There is a limit about significant financial commitments that can be made after that. So not for decisions that are already made and already in budgets, but things that are significant commitments on the new authorities. So after, is it November, then you would have to seek Secretary of State approval for over a certain amount of money. And then when the shadow authority is in place, then you would need shadow authority approval as well. So, go on then.
Thank you. So what normally happens is that the government will issue a direction under Section 24 of the 2007 Act, so once a structural order has been made. So it's likely that they will set out that written consent from the successor council, so the unitary, will be required for land disposals or contracts over a certain value. So the structural changes orders that have been made today have set out any disposals over 100,000, capital contracts of more than $1 million, and revenue contracts of more than 100k over the whole life cost. So that's what we would expect in that kind of direction.
And in terms of the executive recommendations, obviously they've all been published, but within there it does give discretion for myself in conjunction with the leader of the council to alter the final proposal before it goes into government, which has to be submitted by 28th of November.
Follow on, Councillor Gall.
Yeah, as a follow-up, thank you for allowing me that courtesy, Madam Mayor. That wasn't the question, Chief. The point wasn't so much the executive, it was more, will those points that have been raised by members tonight be included in the submission that goes to the government, i.e. the comments of reservation or concern, the comments around what happens to our council and companies, all those types of comments that have been genuinely raised tonight in a spirit of trying to be transparent and positive as much as we can, but whilst raising genuine concerns. Will that be included in the report that goes to government?
They can be included in the report, yes. I can't say what will be approved at executive. I mean, Lorraine might want to answer in terms of the process for adjusting any item which has already been submitted to exec.
Yeah, so at this stage, it's only a proposal to executive. Obviously, the proposal's in the published agenda, but it's up to executive still to make the actual determination on the evening.
Councillor Sean Brooks.
Oh, so the answer is yes, they can be included, but the executive would have to make that decision to include them.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. I think I turned into Neil for a minute then. I just want to throw my comments really behind the identity points. When I was small, I remember sitting there and I wrote my address down, and it used to say Sean Brooks, Worcester Road, Marton, Blackpool, Lancashire, England, Great Britain, Europe, and the world. And I think people like that. They like to know where they're going for things. And obviously in Marton, people come to me for a whole year while we didn't really have, and Sarah was off, and now they come to me and Jim. But I always used to say to people, I'm from Marton in Blackpool, and they go, where's that? And I go, well, when you look at Blackpool on the map, it's like, if you look at the map, there's like a little pig's nose that comes out, and we're the little nostril of the thing. And everyone can quickly look at the UK and they can see where Blackpool is. There we are. And when you look at the survey of the residents that went out, they really wanted infrastructure and services and things just to be delivered. So my comments are going to come behind all that tonight. Now, our proposal that we're putting forward, it identifies Blackpool as a beacon. It keeps Blackpool as a beacon. It doesn't water us down with Morecambe, with Southport, Skelmersdale, Cleveley's. It kind of keeps us as the main one. So you've got Fleetwood all the way down and Preston there. So that works for me. It recognises our visitor sector. It recognises £2 billion worth of economy. It recognises our expertise, our unique position there. Now, when you talk about the infrastructure bit, all our roads go to Fylde and Wyre, to just a bit to Fleetwood. We don't go over Shard Bridge. And they go to Preston, the M55, the 583, the train. This makes sense. It makes sense. When you look at what these areas are doing in terms of forward vision and regeneration, we are more in line with Preston than we are with anywhere else in Lancashire. We're regenerating the town, they're regenerating the city. It's all happening, it's all in line, it's all for the people. These services are all for the people. So, from the Ribble to the Wyre, the full pig's nose, as I used to call it, whatever comes here, I just hope that whatever government puts on this carve up doesn't make a pig's ear of it, to be honest. You see the link now. But, talking of that anything but Blackpool link that you seem to be mentioning over there, why people don't want us. We're a visitor economy. We sell that vision across the world. We're an expert in it. So I would like to see that proposal recognised. I'd like the exec to take that forward with those comments on board. And I would like our beacon to be recognised there. And it's very much not on anyone but Blackpool, but we should be selling, upselling, the third of Lancashire visitors, the £2 billion worth of economy. Because that's why it should be anyone with Blackpool. Nobody else can offer that. So that's what I would like to put forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a little bit of a reality check, if I may, Madam Mayor. It's no surprise and it's a shame. People have been speaking about the successes of Blackpool, but yet what they failed to do is they failed to mention the deprivation. 7 of the most deprived neighbourhoods in England, located in Blackpool. Life expectancy has the lowest male life expectancy across the UK. Poverty, reportedly 46% lower than the poverty line. And then Councillor Brooks talks about, with gusto, about how we're a world leader for tourism. Yet Merlin have just pulled out, the second most operator in the world, next to Disney. So how do you square that?
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I think I did mention earlier about the issues, and that's why when I mentioned Fleetwood, Councillor Walsh, is because that's important in terms of so that those health and social inequalities, the deprivation, They are not lost, and they are able to be clearly seen, you know, as and accepted as policy by government. Because what's happened to Fleetwood, and you can't deny that in terms of what has happened. So this model, this is why we have gone with this proposal, because that enables those issues. But it also gives us the opportunity to work constructively, to work better across the place with more activity, more urbanness, with similar issues around housing and health, and as Preston has those issues, particularly around HMOs, education, etc. This gives us the best opportunity to tackle those issues, which we continue to do. Merlin hasn't pulled out. Well, that's up to Merlin. That's not up to Blackpool, because they're still operating here as much as they are anywhere else. That was their decision, and we're really glad to have the tower back and those assets, and they can continue to run whatever they like, but it certainly isn't a reflection on Blackpool. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Councillor
Sorry,
Neil,
do I have the right to reply? I was mentioned then.
sorry?
I'm going to take the right to reply because I was mentioned then in name. But I just want to say I'm never, ever going to stand in this chamber, or any chamber for that matter, and put this town down. Not once. Everyone's got their issues, and frankly, I would have thought the Conservative group over there would be fully behind getting our proposal, given it will bring them a bus station
Brooks.
and a market.
Thank you. Councillor Neil Brooks, did you put your hand up?
Yeah, and I think I want to try and introduce a bit of positivity into the discussion, because we're 25 years behind the curve, basically. When you look at Merseyside, when you look at Manchester, when you look at the metropolitan authorities and the combined authorities, and the amount of funding that they've sucked out of Whitehall for their communities. And this is an opportunity for us in Lancashire. And I say for Lancashire because that's important. Because when I've gone to combined authority dues or presentations to the business community or whatever, they're just fed up of politicians and district councils and unitary authorities fighting like ferrets in a sack to preserve their own little fiefdoms. And it's not about fiefdoms, it's about what we can bring to Blackpool and to Lancashire. And I think this will bring millions and millions of pounds to help transform all our economies. And in terms of where we are in Blackpool, yes, we're a tourist economy, but it hasn't helped us as a coastal community in terms of deprivation and bringing money in. It hasn't helped Morecambe, it hasn't helped Fleetwood, and all the coastal communities that have been left behind by the existing arrangements. So we need to address that. And what we've said is one way to address that is to look at the areas we go to work. We've been banging on for years about a rail link to Passing Loop at Blackpool South, so that our people in Blackpool South and in Blackpool can get into Preston, can get into employment opportunities across the northwest. So we're not just about arguing about whether we're working in the tourist sector. We can offer our kids opportunities and transport links to where better paid jobs are and more prospects are. And that's what this will bring. And we talked about our wholly owned companies. I'm proud of our wholly owned companies. In terms of the bus company, for instance, I think anybody will be pleased to get involved with us, because there's only 5 local authority owned bus companies in the country, and one of them is us. And we talk about housing. We've got housing companies that are doing a great job in regenerating. And actually, we're one of the only councils in the Lancashire area with a housing revenue account to build council houses to address those things. So I would have thought that these are the local authorities, the people that don't want us will be thinking, oh, hang on a minute, a housing revenue account, we can work with that. We can build council houses, we can do stuff here for our residents. And that's what we should all be thinking about. And that's what our proposal is about. It's about improving prospects for all concerned, not just in Blackpool, but across Lancashire, because that will bring millions of pounds to our area. And that's what the business community, people that got the finger on the pulse of the economy and what drives it, will be asking for, as well as residents when they understand it properly.
Councillor Brooks, Councillor Sloman, Councillor Scott.
Sorry, I'm going to be really boring and back to connectivity again. As far as I'm aware, and when I last looked, there are trains that go from Blackpool Blackpool all over the place. They don't just go to Preston. So to say it's necessary to join up with Preston because they've got a train station, I think it's a bit much. And I'm not aware, unless you could tell me differently, that there are any plans from Avanti or anybody that's operating a train line to stop suddenly serving going north to Lancaster. Thank you.
Do you want to reply?
Right to reply, Lady Mayor. I'd just like to say you need to come down to Blackpool South Station and stand on that station early in the morning with the workers that work at Fox's Biscuits at Kirkham, trying to get to their early shift, and the number of times that one train an hour gets cancelled. That's why we need connectivity in the south and across the town, and more of it, to get our kids and our workers across the northwest. Because the number of times that train's cancelled is appalling. It's appalling and it's unnecessary if we get the right economic support and the investment in the infrastructure. And we talked about stuff going to Fleetwood and Polton and rail links and tram links. That's all possible if we invest in it. We can't afford to do it on our own, and neither can anybody else in Lancashire, which is why we need this inward investment.
You, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I hope you're right, Councillor Brooks. I'm afraid I don't share your optimism. Just a couple of things I wanted to say. I hope that the transitional costs that we've been promised or assured of this evening will transpire, and I hope I live long enough to see them. I fear I might not. Unfortunately, Leader, I think you misunderstood what I said earlier. You came back with your reply that there is going to be another public consultation. I wasn't asking for a public consultation. What I was remarking was that the residents I've spoken to are saying they should have had a vote, not a consultation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Would you like to reply, Councillor Williams?
I mean, ultimately, it's a vote for political party, isn't it? And we're all here, the subject to the vote, the will of the people, and ultimately that will be what determines on this proposal and how it delivers. So, thank you.
Councillor Sloman. Councillor Sloman.
Sorry. Councillor Brooks Senior, I share your pain about the train station at Blackpool South and not being able to get trains and trains being cancelled. I share your pain because I've been consistently asking for a direct bus route from the north of the town to Blackpool Victoria Hospital. We still don't have one, so I share your pain. Thank you.
Councillor Sloman. Councillor Walsh.
Can you just confirm, Councillor Williams, did you just say then that if it went to the public consultation, it would be nothing more than a political vote? Is that correct? All right, okay. Okay, because that's what it is. That's what you're basically doing. This is all a smokescreen to create a red coast. Let's be honest, be truthful, stand up, be counted.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Humphreys.
I'll just give this a go. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Right until that very last moment, I think
Councillor Humphreys, are you able to stand?
Not very good at standing up. Right until this very last moment, we've been really good in this council. We've not done the hyperbole that we normally get from the other side. Well, we suddenly we're compared with Zimbabwe and Mozambique. They haven't come up yet. But right then, it's not about whether we want a red wall or around the coast. We want something that works for Blackpool. We want the best for Blackpool. We want a constructive, symbiotic relationship between the people of Blackpool and the visitors to Blackpool, because without that symbiotic relationship, nothing works. What we would also like is a more symbiotic relationship with those opposite us, where we actually work together now to get this plan working and working properly. But at the moment, there seems to be a great resistance and a desire to make this a political bonfire, which it wasn't until the very last moment. Thank you.
Humphreys. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Unfortunately, we are where we are because the decision that's going to, and I'll repeat what I said earlier, the words of the leader, shape services and lives for the next 30 years or more. That decision for this town is being made by 9 people. 9 people. Not all of us, 9 people. Thank you, Madam.
Would you like to reply, Councillor Williams?
It follows consultation, it follows years and years, and more recently, more intensively over the last couple of years of considering all the data, the connectivity, all of that information, working with other local authorities. There will be a further consultation in the new year, and we have to make a decision. Councillor Scott, that's what we have to do. That's what we were elected to do, and we will do so on the right reasons and to deliver the best for this town.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Cooper, I'm so sorry, Councillor Cooper.
Answer to anything. Nobody likes change. It frightens us all to death. It's fear of the unknown. And I would imagine that around Lancashire, these similar debates are taking place all over the place. It's more for my own information, really. With regards to the proposal of the way forward for ourselves, the areas we are linked with, Fylde, Preston, have they almost agreed between Preston and Fylde that this is their preferred option as well? Or are we debating simply from a Blackpool perspective? I just wasn't sure where it fit in the bigger picture, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
No, it isn't either of theirs preferred option. Whether there will be a scaling down of options, whether government will decide that all 5 options will go to public consultation, that will obviously be a matter for government. But no, it isn't a choice for Preston. Preston is the other, what we've likened to, I think they call it the university corridor, we call it the banana shape. I think Fylde is the 3 model.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any more questions? Would you like a final comment on the report, Councillor Williams, or have you had enough? I'm content. You're content, okay. So in that case then, councillors, this concludes the business of the meeting this evening, and thank you.